Okay, welcome to our final session of Mishna Ta'anit, Why We Fast. I think we have everybody. And correct me if I'm wrong, do we have any folks who are new to the class today? No. All right, I didn't think so. I thought everyone had been with us at least once. Happy to be on this journey with you. And this time I finished my lunch before. All right, we are going to skip around the last 2 chapters and a half, let's say, and really look at when are some of these communal fast days supposed to happen and when should they not happen. So that's our first point of discussion today. My mouse is being wonky. There we go. Okay. All right, this is the end of the chapter we started looking at last week, Mishna Ta'anit. Would anyone like to read the English? All right, Pat, and then Frank, you're up next, and Fran after that.
They do not decree upon the community a fast to begin on a Thursday in order not to cause a rise in market prices. Rather, the first 3 fasts are held in this order: Monday, Thursday, and Monday. The second 3, Thursday, Monday, and Thursday. Rabbi Yosh says, just as the first 3 fasts should not begin on a Thursday, so too neither the second 3 nor the last 7.
Okay, I think we may have spoken last time about when the community would gather in ancient Israel, and often this half urban, half rural community would get together on Mondays and Thursdays that's when the market would open. I like to think of it as an open air farmers market, but that's when everyone would come to sell their wares. And that's also when the rabbi said we should chant Torah in the public square because you have the community together. We want to get our sacred scripture out when everyone is there. So these are the days we're playing with when we're talking about this communal fast. So not the individual fasting, but when the community gets together. And the idea being that ideally, when we're experiencing a communal fast, we're actually physically with each other to sort of join together in the act of fasting. One of the reasons why we get more people to come to services on Yom Kippur than any other day of the year, it's a little bit easier to be hungry when you're with other hungry people. You can fetch together, and something that we're going to wrestle with this year when we're in virtual community, but not able to sit next to each other and see one another. So the question becomes here is exactly how are we going to play with the market days to make these communal fasts happen? Okay, so the first opinion is that as long as you start on a Monday, you'll be okay, because the fear is starting a fast on a Thursday will drive up market prices. I'm trying to exactly tease out why that might be. I mean, Thursday's the day before Shabbat. You would think that a lot of people would be buying for the long weekend to make sure that they had enough through Shabbat, as they wouldn't be able to get what they needed over that day of rest. Is it a function of nobody eating, so there's all of this food lying around? But that doesn't make any sense. I wonder if it's just like there's a fear of scarcity, which would drive up prices. We see often when bad things happen, there's always people who try to take advantage of it. I'm remembering Hurricane Sandy, when there were people gouging for things like food or airline tickets and things like that. We've seen in the pandemic an attempt to try to counteract some of that bad behavior. So there's this fear that if we start the fast Thursday.
Toilet paper.
Sorry, what, Barbara?
Toilet paper.
Right, exactly.
And paper towels.
If you can find it, it may be more expensive. I'm thinking less so at ShopRite, but on Amazon, I remember when I was deep into puzzle mode in April and May, and you were lucky if you could get a puzzle for less than $40. I was like, this is ridiculous. A puzzle like this would normally cost half the price, but the supply was limited, and so they could jack up the prices. The first opinion is that Monday, Thursday, Monday, followed by Thursday, Monday, Thursday is fine. The second minority opinion, Rabbi Yossi, says, no, let's not risk it and just keep it all starting on Mondays. So this is just to let us know that it's at these times when we get together as a community, that's when we're supposed to experience the communal fast. Evelyn.
So that's why they wouldn't do Tuesday or Wednesday?
Right, because everyone's at their house, so there's no communal element to it, or their farm, and people are spread out. They may not live as closely together as some of us do in our neighborhoods. So there was no sense of community. So if it's a communal fast, it's prescribed for these days where the community physically gets together. All right, so here we're starting to tease out, okay, these are the days that we are going to do the communal fasts. Go to the next slide of Frank, if you'll read that. But here's some days we're not supposed to do communal fasts.
They do not ordain upon the community a fast on Rosh Chodesh or Hanukkah or on Purim. But if they had already begun a series of fasts and one of these days intervened, they do not interrupt their fasts. The words of Rabban Gamaliel, Rabbi Meir said, even though Rabban Gamaliel said that the fasts should not be interrupted, he agrees that they should not complete their fasts. And the same applies to the 9th of Av, should it fall on a Friday.
Okay, let's talk about what are these days that are mentioned here. First, we have Rosh Chodesh, which is the head of the month. This is when the new month begins, and it is a festive day. You are supposed to recite Hallel, which is a series of psalms in praise of God as an expression of our joy that a new month has begun.
Half Hallel.
Sorry, say that again, Sherry?
Half Hallel.
Right. So, but there's a liturgical element here to mark the day as a festival day. It's not a major festival, of course. It happens every month, but we're definitely supposed to not. I mean, the idea being this is supposed to be a day of joy. Thank goodness we made it another month, as opposed to a day for fasting.
Thursday and Friday this week.
All right. Yes, it's Rosh Chodesh Elul. Okay. Then another time when we're supposed to recite Hallel and other psalms of praise and joy on Hanukkah, expressing our gratitude for the miracle of the story. Depending on who you ask, is that miracle what the rabbis decreed, that the one jar of oil lasted 8 nights instead of 1, or is it the miracle that a small group of rebel guerrilla warriors were able to defeat the Syrio-Greco army? You get to decide. But either way, the rabbi said we should be rejoicing, and this should be a time to not to fast. And then again on Purim, which is the day of joy par excellence, where we're supposed to dress up and drink lots of adult beverages and and laugh and party. We shouldn't fast on that day. And it just so happens that there's already a prescribed fast the day before, the fast of Esther. So we don't want to be fasting on Purim as well. However, Rabban Gamliel says, if you've already started these series of fasts, which we talked about earlier, that, they come back to back to back, it's too much to interrupt them. You want to get that flow going of your fasting, because we're really trying to nudge God into making it rain. Then Rabban Gamliel says, they don't interrupt their fasts for the work for these specific days. But Rabbi Meir, of course, disagrees with Rabban Gamliel, because why 2 Jews, 3 opinions? You don't interrupt your fast, or you can interrupt your fast, or sorry, one more time. They just don't complete the fast. So in this case, so it's a function of, do you stop the fast and pick it back up? Or do you just say, oh, we're done here, and the sacred day, the festive day, cancels out the rest? So that's the debate we're having right now. And then we get the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, which was right around the time that we started this class together, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. And oy vavoy, what do you do if it falls on Shabbat? Although here really it's talking about a budding Shabbat, but you don't want it too close to any days that are joyful. So the 9th of Av, the only day that would be is Shabbat. Sherry.
One year at Cage, Tisha B'Av did fall on Shabbat. So we just pushed it off to Sunday.
So actually, that's what Jewish tradition has come to practice, that if Tisha B'Av does fall on Shabbat, we actually celebrate the 9th of Av on the 10th of Av. All right, no worries, Susie. We're so glad you were able to join us when you could. Okay, and now, so this idea of what can interrupt the fast, and clearly there's a sense that fasting is in conflict with days of joy. The fasting is not supposed to be a happy occasion. The reason why we're fasting is because we're facing an existential threat. We need the rain so we can grow our crops, so we can live to see another day. And but we still want to make sure that we punctuate our time, our calendar, with these moments of joy. So, so there's a balance here, and the rabbis are really mindful that we cannot live in sadness all the time. That's why we have Tisha B'Av, a catch-all day for a lot of different kinds of sadness. Because if we had days, for all the things that we celebrate Tisha B'Av for, we could probably fill the entire year. And the rabbis knew that that wouldn't be healthy. So we have one day. Now we have that day and Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day, which was very controversial when it was first put on the Israeli calendar, because we already have a day of mourning. But okay, 2 days a year that are that sad, we can handle that. And that we have a taste of that sadness on these communal fast days. And how do we make sure that we are complementing them with the festive days as well? All right, any thoughts or questions before we move on to the next slide?
Days, the fast is sun up to sundown?
Yes, so we're talking about sun up to sundown. There was a slide I chose not to share, but I could right now. It has to do with also not just eating, but drinking. But what about wine? Wine is a symbol of our joy. Can we drink wine after the sun goes down? So technically the fast for the day is complete, but are we allowed to drink wine even in between? And so it depends on your position in society. Some folks are allowed to drink wine in the intermittent times and others are not.
What?
And I think, so I'll show you the slide. And I don't know enough about exactly all of the roles, but I'm wondering if you had a particularly hard job, the rabbis let you drink wine because you sort of need to decompress. So that's my working theory. Here's the slide. And also, other pieces of, daily hygiene. Who can cut their hair, who can wash their clothes. Some folks are allowed to do so on certain times when others are not. But really the point for this slide, for what we're going to discuss in a moment, and what we've started already discussing already, is the honoring of Shabbat. And so we mentioned that, I think, in our first class, that we have to be mindful of Shabbat, which is our weekly day of joy, as we're teasing out all of this, all of these rules for fasting. Okay, Fran, I believe you were up next. We did that one already. Great, for reading.
And Rava bar Mehasiah said that Rav Hama bar Guria said that Rav said, a fast is effective to neutralize a bad dream like fire burns chaff. Rav Hista said, and a fast is effective specifically on that day that he dreamed. And Rav Yosef said, one suffering from a bad dream that he dreamed is permitted to fast even on Shabbat.
So this is not in our Mishnah. This is a text from the Talmud, and the reason why the names are so hard is because they're all Babylonian rabbis. So it's some not our usual Hebrew fare. And here we're connecting to the thread of Shabbat and fasting. But the context is not that we need rain. What is the context here? Why might someone fast?
The bad dream.
Okay, so we have to remember that in the ancient world, dreams were believed to have incredible power, whether it was prophetic or omen. So if you have a bad dream, the idea is that you should fast. Like get rid of that bad dream. We want it out. We don't want any of this. And if you think of Fiddler on the Roof, how does Tevye convince Golda that Matel should get married to his daughter, Model the tailor? Then, he tells her about his bad dream. So it's just, it comes, we see this a couple of points along the way throughout Jewish tradition. But even on Shabbat, the day you're not supposed to fast, if you have a bad dream on Friday night, you can fast the next day because, got to get that bad dream out of here. So there is dispensation for fasting on Shabbat in certain circumstances. Alan, and we're going to see some of these other certain circumstances where we bend the rules for on Shabbat in just a moment.
So is the source of the bad dream God? Or
Yes, that is the understanding.
and that's why you have to fast to overcome the whatever's causing the bad dream, which is
Right. It could be an act of repentance. It could be a sense of saying, sending God a message. I heard you. I'm gonna try to be mindful of whatever it is. But yes, there's this act of cleansing. I'm thinking of like a juice cleanse. Only you're not trying to clear your gut. You're trying to clear the bad dreams.
And what happens if it's a recurring bad dream? What do you do?
Then you're gonna be hungry a lot. Yeah, I didn't go deep into the what do you do with dreams area, but I imagine if it's a recurring bad dream, it's just going to be unfortunate for you. Maybe tries to eat something different before bed. My theory. All right, let's keep moving along. All right, we're back to Mishna Ta'anit. We're back in the realm of the early Palestinian sages. Okay, who'd like to read this slide?
I'll take it.
Okay, Sherry.
The order of public fast mentioned above is enacted because of lack of the first rain. But if the crops have undergone an unusual change, they sound a blast immediately. Similarly, if the rain has stopped for 40 days between one rainfall and the next, they should sound a blast immediately because it is a plague of drought. If rain falls for crops, but not for trees, for the trees, but not for crops, for both of these, but not for cisterns, ditches, or caves, they should sound a blast immediately.
Okay, the word for sounding a blast in Hebrew is related to truah, the sound we make with the shofar. This was their way of getting the word out. And here we have specifically, when does a community sound a blast? So what are some of the points in time or markers for sounding the blast?
If it stopped raining for 40 days,
Okay.
California better do it.
All right, so even if you've had rain already, you still need more rain. So we're counting the days in between rainfall. Once we hit the 40-day mark, 40 being one of the numbers in our tradition that comes back around. We wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, wilderness where there wasn't a lot of rain. Noah and Noah's Ark floated in the flood for 40 days and 40 nights. So this is a number we're familiar with. And it's a long time to go without rain for 40 days, especially during your rainy season. All right, so that's one marker. Alan, did you have a question or comment?
I was going to say 40 days seems way too long to wait. If you're in the rainy season, 40 days seems, it may tie into, to wandering in the desert and all of that, but it doesn't make any sense from an agriculture point of view, does it?
Right. So here we come back to where we started with all of this is, do we have any power over the weather? At the end of the day, the answer is no. So this is about how do we psychologically try to enable our agency in a situation where we don't have any. So the best we can do is appeal to God for rain. We are praying for rain throughout all of this. we mentioned the first class, as soon as Simchat Torah kicks in, that's the current tradition. We had a little argument at the beginning as to when. Then we pray for rain every single day in the Amidah, our standing prayer, during the Givorot. And so we are doing that. So it's not like we're doing nothing, but here it's like, how do you escalate? So 40 days is symbolic, but also
This
long
is-
enough to really be anxious. Hagi?
This is also very much, if you think, this is like the Israeli, the way the system, the weather system works in Israel. You do have years where you have a bit of rain and then you don't have rain forever. And then you have a bit of rain in the end. I mean, it's nothing like anything here. And exactly, you have the same like the other half that, you'd have rain, but it's really not enough for anything. I mean, it's not getting into the groundwater or whatever. So this really fits with the patterns that you can see in Israel, even until today, as far as, the weather. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank.
Can you tell me what the difference is between rain for crops and rain for trees?
What a good question you ask. So clearly they were much more in tune with nature than we are. But there was clearly, so I'm thinking about the potted plants that I have on my patio. They don't need as much watering as the oak trees in my backyard. So my guess is it's really just how much rain is falling. So if we use that metaphor, there's enough rain for the crops to go, but there's just not enough rain to sustain the trees, which are larger and would likely need more water.
And there's sometimes crops.
Right, exactly. So that's sort of, I think, where the line gets blurred. My guess is they are referring to, well, is it, let me look at the Hebrew. Okay, here I go. The Hebrew says, oh, it's a certain kind of tree, it would look like. Do you agree with me, Hagit?
Well, they're saying Ilan, but my guess is that Ilan would be used as a general, like any other trees, because it would be,
But
my guess-
Ilan is not a fruit-bearing tree, correct?
No, it's
Right.
just like your evergreens or your, whatever, but no, it's not a fruit. They're saying either plants or trees, but they're not talking about fruit trees. Yes.
Right. So I would say that there's a distinction being made that way. I'd have to look at the commentaries to get a sense of if that was the case. It makes less sense to me the second way around for the trees, but not for the crops, because I would think trees would need more rain than crops, but maybe it depends on the tree and it depends on the crop.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
But clearly, they're saying there's different levels of rain, and there are levels of rain that make that are so low they make us nervous. And so if we're going to hit any of those, low level rain marks, we get nervous and we're going to blow the shofar because we want to sort of wake God up and say, remember, you promised some rain here. And we didn't talk about at the beginning if the crops have undergone an unusual change. And we'll see in just a moment what those changes might be. But like, for example, my tomato plants, I had a tomato that looked like it was growing beautifully, and then it stalled. And it was green for like 2 months and then finally turned red. But I was nervous about my tomato plant. So there goes an unusual change. It should not have played out that way, in which case I would have sounded the shofar so that everybody could fast with me. All right. The other word I want to draw our attention to right now is plague. Plague of drought. So I just want to confirm makah. It's the same exact word that we use when we talk about the Passover story and the 10 plagues, the makot. So this is a very serious word we're using here, and we are clearly anxious. And also, I think that word in English resonates with all of us right now.
Yep.
All right, who would like to read our next slide? All right, Fran, thank you.
Yeah. And so And so too, a city which has a plague or its buildings collapse that city fast, and they sound a blast, but those in the places around it fast, but do not sound the alarm. Rabbi Akiva says, they sound the alarm, but do not fast. What constitutes a plague? If in a city that can supply 500 foot soldiers and 3 deaths occurred on 3 consecutive days, behold, this constitutes a plague. Less than this is not a plague.
Okay.
We got a plague.
I was just going to say,
I'd say
all I
this
can
is a
hear is,
plague.
how many cases are there today? How many ICU beds are full? You know, right?
1,000 deaths a day, that's
We-
a plague.
Okay, so what constitutes a plague or a pandemic? We learn from, I believe it's the book of Leviticus, I have to double check, that buildings can contract the plague just as human beings can. I liken this to mold or some other destructive force that encroaches upon a building's structural integrity. So you can have a plagued building which then collapses. So just to give you a sense, you know, if the wood is rotted, et cetera, et cetera. Not that we're necessarily building with wood in the ancient Near East, but that's okay. But those are, you know, sort of our frames of reference. So let's say a city contracts a plague and lo and behold, buildings in the city collapse. That's, I think, reason to be anxious. And so we both fast, that city both fasts and sounds the shofar. So now we have the 2 different practices going on. Sounding the blast does not necessarily necessitate fasting and vice versa, excuse me, because we see that the city in the environs or the area around that city that's fasting, they fast but don't sound the alarm. So they have a different response, similar but different. And we know that plagues can be contagious. So yes, the environs should be nervous. If one city had a problem, we should be on the lookout to make sure that our city isn't going to have a problem too, or our town or our village. Rabbi Akiva, of course, says the opposite. Right? He can be contrary. But what constitutes a plague? All right, here we have an objective measurement. The rabbis needed to understand at what point does it is it no longer a bad cold and it's instead a plague, to use some parlance of our time. And in his measurement, or sorry, the text's measurement here is if a city can supply 500 foot soldiers. So of all of the men of military age, the city would be able to draft 500 of them. And there are 3 deaths occurring on 3 consecutive days. So what I'm not entirely sure of, at the end of the 3 days, are there 3 deaths or 9 deaths? Either way, it doesn't sound like a large number, but clearly that was the measurement they used. Boom, this is a plague and we need to be worried and go into quarantine. Alan.
So here you have 2 different opinions. How does it get resolved, or does it not get resolved and people can do either?
I would have to look at later Jewish legal compendiums to see what the answer is. So like the go-to book is the Shulchan Aruch. Whatever the Shulchan Aruch says on this is what we do, basically. But, you know, we see a lot of arguments in the Mishna and the Gemara, the Talmud, that get resolved by later scholars.
I have a question, particularly as it related to a building. Is there a Hebrew word for disaster, and is it different from the Hebrew word for plague?
I believe so, absolutely. Hagit, if you just want to.
Disaster would be a son, but I don't know that that'll be the biblical world. That's, I think, a modern word. And a plague is makah, but actually what they're using here is dever. That's actually in Hebrew, that's what you get now. I mean, that's the sickness that you can still get nowadays. So it's not a plague as far as makah, one of
Pandemic?
those.
No, but Dever
No,
is
Dever.
one of the 10 plagues in the story of Exodus.
Yeah.
So it's a specific kind of.
I don't think, to me, it's a big issue, but I'm wondering whether in bringing modern thinking to this, a plague can be a disaster. It could be a biological plague, what we're having, but if a building collapses, because of a windstorm or some other structural.
Poorly stored
That
explosive.
could be a disaster. And I see it as just, they're all disasters.
Right.
Well, if
Exactly.
they're talking about the building collapsing because
Yeah.
of lack of rain or too much rain, it could be that the foundation is being compromised,
Right.
which causes it to collapse.
Okay.
But absolutely, Phyllis, I think we can extrapolate from this,
Yeah, that's all.
which is
Yeah.
exactly what I was trying to do.
Right.
Evelyn. Oh, did you
Better
freeze?
better if I unmute myself. When they say 3 deaths, I assume they're thinking of something exotic, you know, I mean, I'm sure they had more than 3 deaths in a day, you know, like followed by it on 3 consecutive days. So they must have 3 that they can't explain.
Due to the dever. So, I mean, Hagit saying that the term is very specific. So if they die because of this specific illness, just like what we're doing right now, we're not talking about everyone who dies writ large. We're just talking about folks who contract COVID-19 and
That makes sense.
so it's very similar here in this case. All right, who'd like to read this screen? Our next Mishna. Go for it, Frank.
For these, they sound a blast in all places. For the drying up of the crops, shidafon, for plant disease, for locusts, and for the hasil, a type of locust, for wild beasts, and for the sword, they sound a blast. For these are plagues likely to spread.
Okay, so now we're not talking about dever, we're talking about, it starts with some of those changes in the crops that were alluded to earlier. So there's a specific kind of drying up of crops called shidafon. We're going to see that again in a moment. Different kinds of plant disease, locusts, which like to eat plants. So what the reason why one of the 10 plagues of locusts was so bad is because it ate all of the food sources for the people in Egypt. And then we have wild beasts. So we're sort of reliving some of sorry, I'm losing my words, the plagues of the past. But guess what? These are things that people dealt with in the ancient Near East. So it's not as if they're going to go away just because we're out of Egypt. And now we get something that is not nature related. For the sword, what do we think they're talking about here?
Attack.
An attack.
Invasion.
Sorry, what?
Invasion?
Right. Maybe something they were not expecting. It's not like we're going to war, but maybe an ambush, something that feels out of their control, that they weren't expecting, that goes against what normally happens. And it's interesting that they're really reading the word plague in a broad sense here. And here we go back to what Phyllis was saying, that when there is a disaster that we are not anticipating, boom, we're in a plague mode, and we're going to sound the shofar because we want to wake up God, wake up ourselves, and get moving to try to address this disaster. And it's unfortunately, that's not only natural disasters. There's other kinds of disasters as well. Fran.
But this doesn't have to do with rain anymore.
Right. These are related to the lack of rain, which is out of our control and is needed for our survival. These are other things that could happen that are out of our control and can affect our ability to survive.
Okay.
Exactly. So now, it's related because we're talking about blowing the shofar, which is closely tied to the fasting. But these are other things that could result in a shofar blast. This targeted specific shofar blast. And also it's a really good way to get the word out. You hear the shofar blast. Oh, what's going on? What's the problem now? So I didn't realize there was a shidafon. What are we going to do? And then people can go into town on those market days and, what's our communal response going to be? All right, next slide. Any volunteers to read? Pat, thank you.
It once happened that elders went down from Jerusalem to their own cities and ordered a fast because there was seen in Ashkelon a shidduchon, which affected as much grain as would fill an oven with loaves. They also decreed a fast because wolves devoured 2 children on the other side of the Jordan.
Oh.
Rabbi Yos says, not because they devoured the children, but merely because they were seen.
Okay, so
Wonderful.
here's a story that's come in to illustrate what we're talking about here. What we know is they fasted, or a fast was decreed. Why was the fast decreed? 2 different issues here. One, we have a shidduchon that clearly affected a significant amount of grain. There were definite potential measurements that the Mishna understood for an oven, but if we think about our own oven, if you could fill up your oven just with the grain, forget about other things, that's a lot of grain. And so clearly that's enough shidduchon to make people nervous. So they decreed a fast. But then we also have the story about wolves devouring 2 children. So back to the other slide, that the example of wild
The
beef.
wild beast.
Exactly. And, you know, we're doing our best to try to keep the wild beasts out at bay, but every once in a while, an alligator eats a pet dog in Florida. And apparently in the ancient Near East, wolves might eat children. Be careful where you play. So, you know, why exactly the Rabbi Yossi point, we don't need to get into the weeds on that, but these were things out of our control that could impact our ability to survive. And don't forget, you know, children are the future. If we don't have children, we don't have the next generation, the whole community stops existing. So, you know, that's part of the poignancy of this particular story. Sherry.
If there's a drought, the wild beasts are going to come down out of the wherever the hills to look for food.
That's
And
right.
they'll eat whatever is available.
Right, exactly. And when the when the ecosystem is messed with, when it's disrupted, then that's when you get these blurring the boundaries of human settlements and animal settlements. Exactly, and that, you know, they need to eat too. If there's a problem in the food chain, we might start seeing interaction we weren't hoping for. I love it. Yeah,
We eat the wolf, that's fine. They eat us, it's bad.
correct. Correct. Not a good sign. Okay, we're back to talking about Shabbat. Who'd like to read this slide? Frank, thank you.
I'll read. For these matters, they sound a blast, even on Shabbat. If a city is besieged by Gentile troops, or a river, or if a ship is foundering on the sea. Rabbi Yossi says, they sound a blast for help, but not for an outcry for the sake of prayer. Shimon, the Yemenite, says, also for a plague, but the sages did not agree with him.
Okay. So rewind. There is a prohibition on blowing the shofar on Shabbat. This is true even of Rosh Hashanah. So this year, the first day of Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbat. Our conservative friends are not going to be blowing shofar on that day. We will be, but our official shofar blowing is looking like it's going to be Sunday afternoon. And so our conservative friends are all blowing on Sunday for this very reason. And one of the issues is that it is an instrument that you are not supposed to be touching on Shabbat. Long story short, that's the context for this, but they're saying that there are exceptions to the rule. And these are existential threats. So if a city is besieged by Gentile troops, so now we have a foreign nation invading us, that is always a bad sign for our ancient ancestors. It says if a city, if I understand this correctly, a city being besieged by a river, I'm thinking a flood. That's definitely an existential threat. Or if a ship is foundering on the sea, you just don't know if your ship is going to sink or not. I mean, these are very serious concerns. So we sound the blast on Shabbat even. And it's so funny. I think it's clear that it's Gentile troops because the Israelite troops would never fight us on Shabbat. That's my own, gloss on this. But that aside, at least these are the specific cases that they spell out.
The key word there is for help.
Is what?
For help. they needed to save lives. So they're gathering people in to help there.
Right, and the next sentence I'm actually confused about, but Fran had her hand up, so before we hit.
I have a question. We've moved away from fasting to the shofar, and you had said that it's because they're related, which raises this question for me. Besides Rosh Hashanah and blowing because of these kinds of reasons, existential threats, when else is the shofar sounded?
Rosh Chodesh,
That's what I'm trying to remember. In the ancient world,
the whole month of Elul,
we know the story of Jericho, where we circled the city 7 times and we were blowing the shofar all that time.
the month of Elul in the
Right there.
morning.
Right. So every day, this last month of the Hebrew calendar, we're supposed to blow the shofar at the end of the morning service. But I'm thinking in the ancient world, they definitely used it more frequently. It was definitely used in battle. But I'd have to look to know more.
Okay, so it's not always associated with the need to fast by any means.
Correct. Exactly. And so that's why there's this argument. When do you blow the shofar? When do you fast? When do you do both? So it's like a Venn diagram, there's times where you only blow the shofar, there's times when you only fast, and there's times where you do both.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And okay, so now we get into what Rabbi Yossi is trying to tell us. And I'm going back to the Hebrew because I was really surprised by this. I think I'm in the wrong place. Yep, 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay. Yossi, okay, so it really is, you sound a blast for help, but not for this word we used at the beginning of our class. Za'aka, the cry that we made to God when we were enslaved in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. And so you would think that you'd sound the blast for the more, the cry that comes out from your gut, that there's the community crying out saying, help us, help us. But Rabbi Yossi says, no, we just need regular old help.
Yeah, we just need help. Yeah.
And if you think about it, if it's an invasion of Gentile troops or flood, yeah, great. The ship maybe less so. Although I guess if you think of the Coast Guard, we just need some human help here. Can you help us out, please? So he's saying it's not as existential as you might think. That these are things that other humans can help us with. And so there's this wrestling of what is in our control and what's not in our control. And then Shimon the Yemenite says also for a plague, but the sages do not agree with him. I love it that we record Rabbi Yossi's opinion without that gloss, but Shimon the Yemenite, they didn't agree with him. But there were some who felt also that for a plague that you should blow the shofar on Shabbat. And the question we have that we're experiencing right now is there is no rest from our plague. We're trying to mark Shabbat, to carve out time that feels different than the rest of the week, to be in virtual community. But we know that COVID-19 doesn't take a rest. So I'm feeling more in Shimon the Yemenite's camp that I want to cry out even or blow that shofar even on Shabbat, because every day more lives are being lost to this disease and the plague that is in our lives right now. Alan.
Did many diaspora rabbis contribute to the Mishnah? Or is it relatively rare to have somebody from Yemen contribute to it?
So as soon as the the Israelites were exiled the first time in 586 before the Common Era, there have always been Jews in the diaspora. So this is written in the year 200 after the life of Jesus, or the birth of Jesus, the Common Era. So there were definitely Jews in the diaspora. We think of who were the people that Paul was converting. Paul being a great proto-rabbi. Hillel was doing the same exact thing. We were converting the Gentiles in other lands in the diaspora. So we definitely see some diaspora voices throughout the Mishnah.
Because this is basically a Yavne production, by Palestinian rabbis. So
right, we don't see it as frequently as we might in the Talmud, for example. but we definitely do see it. Great question. Okay, we're starting to wrap up. I actually took the next two Mishnayot and flipped them. So we went from we just had 7, now we're at 9. We're gonna end with 8 today. So that's how I want to finish out. Who would like to read Mishnah 9 in chapter 3?
I'll read.
Phyllis.
Okay. If while they are fasting rain falls, if before sunrise they do not complete the fast, if after sunrise they do complete the fast. Rabbi Elazar says, if before noon they do not complete the fast, if after the noon they do complete it. It happened that the rabbis decreed a fast in Lod, and rain fell before noon. Rabbi Tarfon said to them, go, eat and drink and make a holiday. They went and ate and drank and observed the day as a holiday. And at evening time they came and they recited the Hallel HaGadol.
Okay.
No idea what these people are talking about.
No problem. Okay. So we're going back to the headspace of fasting for it to make it rain. Okay. So we've gone full circle. We want to make it rain, or we want to remind God that it's time to rain. Let's say it rains while we're fasting or while we're in the midst of a fast. If it starts raining before sunrise.
Before Shachrit.
But let's just go with sunrise because we all understand that. They do not complete the fast. So what does that mean? At 5 a.m. this morning, it rained. Great. I don't have to fast today. We're done. The fast is over. If it starts raining after sunrise, so I've already started my fast, then I finish out my fast. So even if sunrise is at 5:30 and it starts raining at 5:31, tough noogies for me. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, noon is the benchmark, not sunrise. Okay, great. I like Rabbi Eliezer a lot. Then it happened that the rabbis decreed a fast in Lod and rain fell before noon. Okay, so here we're in the what do you do when it's according to Rabbi Eliezer's teaching? Rabbi Tarfon, who must have been the leader of this community, said, go eat and drink and make a holiday. So it sounds like Rabbi Tarfon agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. That's all that we need to know about that. They went, ate, and drank. Great. And then they recited the Hallel HaGadol. We talked about Hallel, these psalms of praise that are supposed to be musical and joyful. We want to be sure when we are concluding our fast, because yay, we got rain, that we say thank you. And we use the same liturgy that we say thank you on Rosh Chodesh and on Hanukkah and on Purim and these other festive days. So the rabbis say, once you've gotten the thing you've been praying for, you flip the switch and you switch to joy. That we want to mark the occasion both with festive feasting and with liturgy. Does that help, Phyllis?
Oh yeah, you need a spreadsheet to figure this all out.
So if we were going to really dive into this text, I would have made a chart for you.
A spreadsheet, yep.
It's actually how you study rabbinic literature, is you have to make a lot of charts. All right, yeah. Whose opinion is which and where? Yeah. All right, and we're going to end with a story that is often told, may be familiar to you, but I'm happy to be teaching it here, about Honi the circle maker. And,
I love Honi.
Right, Honi, he's known even more for a different story, but this is how he gets his name. And this text plays on the sermon I gave on Friday night, that what is the difference between a blessing and a curse? And what you, Sherry, might be praying for or consider a blessing may be a curse for me. And so there's this really fine line, especially as we're praying for rain, which we need, but lack of rain is just as much of a curse as too much rain. And how do we try to accomplish that middle ground, especially when it comes to something that we can't control? So who would like to read about Honi Agal? All right, Evelyn, thank you. Evelyn, did we lose you?
Oh.
You are on mute.
You know, I have an unstable connection, so I could try, but it keeps, going in and out. So would you like me to?
Sure, we'll do our best.
Okay. For every trouble that should not come upon the community, they sound the blast, except on account of too much rain. It happened that they said to Honi the circle drawer, "Pray for rain to fall." He replied, "Go and bring in the Pesach ovens so that they do not dissolve." He prayed and no rain fell. What did he do? He drew a circle and stood within it and exclaimed before God, "Master of the universe, your children have turned their faces to me because I am like one who was born in your house. I swear by your great name that I will not move from here until you have mercy upon your children." Rain then began to drip, and he exclaimed, "I did not request this, but rain, which can fill cisterns, ditches, and caves." The rain then began to come down with great force, and he exclaimed, "I did not request this, but pleasing rain of blessing and abundance." Rain then fell in the normal way.
So this is a fairy tale. It's possible there was a man named Honi who had a lot of luck with the weather. We used to call my grandmother a weather witch because she'd go to England and it would stop raining for the few days she was there. We would tell her when we were helping to plan something outdoors, Grammy, put a good word in for us for no rain. The family joke is I got a little bit of her power, just not a lot, just so you know. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. So here we have this fairy tale of if only we had someone in our community who could have a direct line to the guy who makes the rain. I love that Honi is a hawking God. Is this the rain I asked for? Give me the rain I asked for. And then it's not right again. It's still not right, God. Let's get it right. And it's like the humorous version of Abraham arguing with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. We need the right amount of rain. Not too much, not too little. Is that so much to ask for, God? And would that it were so easy, right? Would we only could just draw a circle in the ground and stand inside of it and have that direct line to God? Sherry.
For my daughter's bat mitzvah, we came out of the synagogue on Friday night and it started snowing. And I sat there, said, "Please God, wait till Monday." Saturday, bright blue sky. Monday, a blizzard.
All right, so I'm going to hang out with Sherry. Our forces combined. But there's so many ways that we try to gain control in these situations that are out of our control. I'm thinking of professional athletes who wear their underwear or their socks inside out, or like make sure they hold on to their special amulet, or is there a way that I can try to change my trajectory or my situation or ensure myself for success when things are feeling so out of control and when our communal anxiety is so high, especially for an existential threat. So not just am I going to win this game, but am I going to live to see tomorrow? It brings comfort to think about somebody like Honi, the circle maker.
In Blazing Saddles, when the Indians had captured the Torah and Gene Wilder wanted it back. And they wanted rain. He said, "I can make rain."
And he did.
He did.
And he did, right. And so for us, the thing that's out of our control, the pandemic, the disruption in our economy, the social unrest we're experiencing in our country, it could feel, we could very easily be swayed to feel unmoored and out of control. But like, what are the ways, like fasting, that we can try to sort of regain a sense of agency in our own lives? And the conversation we've been having at Beth Chaim is helping others. So for the folks like Barbara among us who are feeling bored, how can we help others? So like knitting to give away, for example, or for those who are comfortable going grocery shopping for others, or picking up the phone and calling somebody who might be lonely. There are things we can do. It's not going to change the potency of the virus. It's not going to speed up the vaccine creation process, but it helps give us a sense of agency. We're actually making a difference in a time that feels senseless and spinning out of control. So I want to thank you all for joining me as we explore Mishna Ta'anit and talk about the ways our ancestors try to deal with existential threats that were out of their control, and we can learn some of those lessons. If it will inspire you to fast, go for it. But I'm not. That is not my prescription whatsoever. My prescription really is like, how do we show up for each other in ways that are safe and can help even a little bit. I'll close with this story, not from the Mishna, that there's a grandparent with their grandchild at the beach, and the grandchild is walking along the sand and sees starfish, picks one up, throws it back into the water. Grandparent watches as the child continues to pick one starfish up, throw it back in the water as they walk down the beach. And at one point, the grandparent says, "Why are you doing that? You're not going to be able to put all the starfish back into the ocean. So why even bother?" And the grandchild picks up one more starfish and says, "Well, it matters to this one." And then picks up another starfish, and it matters to that one too. And I may not be able to get them all back in, but the ones that are there, it matters. And so let's find ways that we can matter, and we can make it matter and help those in our lives, whether it's by fasting or sounding a shofar or helping someone that we know who's in need. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Rabbi, I have a question.